I regret to have to begin once again with expressing how heartsick so many of us are with respect to the shooting in Texas. Two of the deadliest mass shootings in our history have occurred in the last 35 days. With the greatest respect, prayers are no longer sufficient. There simply is no excuse for assault rifles to be available to the general public, let alone someone who had a clear history of mental issues. But the notion that anybody in civilian life needs an assault rifle is simply preposterous. So our council has previously gone on the record with respect to this issue. And it's just beyond the pale that we're still having this kind of conversation. At what point will Republicans in Congress understand that this cannot be, that this isn't about the Second Amendment, for God's sake? This is about public safety. This is about civilized society. So I apologize that one has to start this conversation talking about things of that nature, but it'd be inappropriate not to. I'll stay with that larger view for just a moment in talking about national political life, because the tax bill that is being discussed would have a profound impact on Montgomery County. Our county is among those localities where we have the highest number of people itemizing their deductions. And I promise you the increase in the standard deduction is not sufficient to compensate for that. So our residents will be very much hurt. Property values will be hurt. So many people will be hurt. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the details of the bill. I did join Congressman Raskin and Ms. Pelosi at the rally, and I confess I was struck by Congressman Raskin's observation that one does need to get into the weeds of this bill because that's where the snakes are. I thought was one of the better lines I had heard in a long time. But and it's true, the details of this bill are very important. I'm somebody who adopted my kids. Okay, you don't have a deduction for adoption expenses. You have people who are sick and spending, oh my goodness, so many dollars trying to stay alive. Their medical expenses will no longer be deducted. So there are a list a mile long of issues like that. But I felt that it was important just to talk about when big things are happening at the national level that have a profound impact on Montgomery County. Those of us who serve our Montgomery County residents have an obligation to speak up. So that's why I'm raising it with you. This is not good for our county. I will leave to others as to whether it is, quote, good for the country. I personally don't believe so, but it is clearly not good for Montgomery County. Now let's turn to Montgomery County. We've got this little minimum wage conversation. It's coming up tomorrow. I promise you I am spending almost every moment in conversations with the lead sponsor, with my colleagues, with the county executive. I continue to hope that we will get to yes. I can't predict that in this moment, but there are 24 hours to go. And I am working hard to see if we can't find common ground that would advance this issue, but do so in a way that does the least amount of harm to those that we are concerned about, which is our small business community in particular. So just know I'm working hard on it. I feel it's my responsibility as president of the council to see if we can't find common ground. That doesn't mean it'll be satisfactory to everybody, but I'm working hard on it. And that's all I can say in this moment, and felt it's too important to to not talk about it, even though it's, quote, not resolved at this moment in time. We had the state come to Montgomery County on Thursday night in the, quote, Transportation Roadshow. I felt that it was a productive conversation. I certainly felt that the state is interested in the issues that our residents are interested in, which is real congestion relief. I have my qualms and questions with respect to the $9 billion proposal, but the Secretary of Transportation, as you may know, has agreed to come to the Transportation, Infrastructure, Energy, and Environment Committee on a week from Thursday, on the 16th. And so there will be ample opportunity to discuss their proposal at that time and get a better understanding of their proposal. But what is also clear, and Ms. Florine made some observations with respect to this as well, is that to the extent to which they're going with a P3 partnership, there are two implications of that. One is that there will be other public funds that had been allocated for these purposes that might then be freed up to pursue more transit opportunities, like the Corridor Cities Transitway, which remains one of our top transit priorities. And what Ms. Florine and what one of our commissioners that serves on our planning board had observed is that there are opportunities when you can use your P3 to include the transit component. That originally this was a multimodal study. It was more than just adding road capacity. It included transit. And so what we want to have is a conversation with the Secretary and with the Governor as to whether or not in the scope of this very large P3, they couldn't figure out a way to include transit in it, insofar as they already are getting experience with the transit piece in the Purple Line. So why not use this as an opportunity to include the Corridor Cities Transitway, particularly when there are a number of industries that would be served by the Corridor Cities Transitway that appear willing to help in a cost share with respect to this. That has been the conversation for a number of years now, that people who would be served by the Corridor Cities Transitway would be willing to be part of a transportation special taxing district. So you can imagine a P3 that would combine the elements that would make this a very doable proposition. So we will want to have that conversation as well. One of the issues that has been so frustrating to many of the residents that we serve is the Department of Transportation's residential parking sticker, and that you needed to do this online and get permission online to do this. And they let this contract for 2 years with the best of intentions, that feeling like this would be a plus for our residents. It turned into a total nightmare, that people that were taking care of their parents that would pull up and they'd get tickets because they didn't have their information. And so a number of us in our entire committee had said to the Department of Transportation, you just need to let this go. And on Thursday, they are coming forward and letting us know that they are letting that go. And we're going back to the old paper permits with a couple of modifications to it. But that we are trying to be customer sensitive. You know, sometimes government thinks it's doing something that serves people, and it just turns out it isn't. And so this is the feedback loop that you need sometimes, is to make sure that government understands that actually that's not working. And for government to respond and say, okay, we tried, we're going to let that go. And that's what's happening here, and that's what's happening on Thursday before our committee. One other piece, we in the Bethesda plan, you may recall that the county government, as part of the Marriott deal, gave over something on the order of 1,100 parking spaces to Marriott. And that's a big deal for a lot of people. And so the question arose as to, well, what's our plan going forward? If we're giving all these parking spaces away, what's that mean for our residents? Are we going to have enough parking spaces, or are we going to be in a deficit mode? And so I had asked for this parking study to be done, and they came before the T&E committee and the Fed committee on Thursday and revealed the results of their study, which shows that we are going to be in a surplus situation, assuming we make any progress in our mode share over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. So in the Bethesda plan, we said, okay, we're going to move up from what I believe today is 38%. And in 5 to 7 years, we expect to be at 45% mode share. And then in 10 years' time, maybe at 50%. So for the first time, they looked at those numbers, and they looked at private parking that is available to the public. And there are a lot of parking spaces available to the public that are available in private parking lots. It isn't incumbent upon county government to provide 100% of the parking spaces that are needed for our residents. In fact, it's a very expensive proposition. So if you have a lot of private parking, plus the public parking, plus making any progress towards meeting our mode share goals, you have enough surplus where we could achieve one of the fundamental objectives in this plan, which was to turn surface parking lots in the heart of Bethesda behind the Women's Farm Market, which are surface parking lots, and turn those into parks. You can do that and still have a surplus of parking in Bethesda. And so it was a very important conversation, because one of the things that our communities struggle with the most when we do these major plans is they always feel like the benefits of the plan come to them at the very end. And so my objective has been to try and create benefits at the front end of the projects, so that as they see their community evolving, they can point to and feel the benefit of it from the get-go, as opposed to at the end of the time. And I think we will be able to achieve that with this plan, giving that parking analysis. We are getting, I spoke with the chairman of the planning board, something like $8 million is going to be coming in short order on our parking, and on the fee that we imposed on developers to go towards things like parks. And that because of Marriott and Apex, et cetera, coming in, we're going to get a good chunk of cash up front. And so we can make good investments up front in this plan, and I'm hoping we will do so. I'm done. Yes, sir.
Could you define mode share?
How many people use private autos and how many people use other forms of public transportation? Bicycling, walking, buses, metro, out of their cars.
And how many, did this study compare the cost of private parking versus public parking?
They indicated that private parking is more expensive than public parking. And one of the questions we had is, parking is considered by many of the specialists, the experts in the field, to be one of the biggest ingredients in trying to promote mode share objectives. So if in fact people are spending more money on parking, it will actually promote greater mode share splits. They didn't analyze that. Are you with me?
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's probably going to also encourage more people to circle Bethesda looking for a public parking spot rather than have to pay extra on a private parking spot.
Hopefully with the apps that we have today, they will be real clear as to where there's parking and where there isn't parking. They shouldn't be circling. Yes, ma'am.
Could you talk a bit more about the conversations that you've had with Councilmember Elrich and others about getting TS, as you were saying, for the new regional
No. It's a fair question, but my conversations with my colleagues, until they bear fruit, are confidential conversations. It's trying to get to yes, and I don't feel it's appropriate to be talking about the details of those conversations until we get to yes.
You mentioned that you're unsure that you have the votes for the minimum wage, so why bring up for a vote on Tuesday?
Well, obviously, there are supporters of the minimum wage. There are 5 votes for, presumably, there are 5 votes for the bill that was introduced by Mr. Elrich. Okay? So, is there a majority of my colleagues who've already made it clear that they support this? Yes. And there were 4 of us who aren't supportive of that particular time frame that was in Mr. Elrich's bill, and the county executive. So we could have another 5-4 vote and another veto. And in my judgment, that just brings us back to where we are today, which is, can we get to a yes that has a broader base of support that we can stand behind? So that's how I approach my work. I am not particularly enamored with the notion of Groundhog Day, if you will, where we once again go through this exercise of having a split 5-4 that leads to another veto that then simply takes us back to where we are in this moment. So from the way I do my work, it's time to try and get to yes.
So the amendments that the HHS committee offered on the bill, that needs to be approved by the full council, is that correct?
The bill that will come before the full council will be the bill that was reported out of committee.
So do those amendments need to be voted on tomorrow?
Ask the question again. So that's the bill that will be before us. And my personal belief with respect to the bill that would come before us is that there would be 4 people in favor of that and 5 people that would not be in favor of that. 5 people that would be in favor more of along the lines of Mr. Elrich's bill as introduced. So my expectation is, in the absence of our coming to some mutual understanding and agreement, is that there would be an amendment that would be offered by Mr. Elrich along the lines of his original bill that would probably pass our full council on a 5-4 vote, and then we'd be back to where we were. So I've made it clear by my vote that I do favor getting to $15 an hour. The difference between us fundamentally has always been about pace. When do we get there? And who is, and how big are the companies that are involved with respect to that?
So if you were able to come to some type of compromise, you would offer up the amendment tomorrow to the bill. If you and Elrich were to agree to some compromise, that could be offered up via amendment tomorrow.
The legislative process is a wondrous thing. It allows for all possibilities. So, the short answer is yes. If Mr. Elrich and I and others can come to a mutual understanding, then presumably that would be what would come before the council ultimately, in one form or another. But we're not there yet. That's why the conversations are continuing. Okay? Anything else, guys? Thank you.
If Ed Gillespie wins tomorrow, would that have any effect on Montgomery County, do you think?
I think that the issue that the governor of Virginia is most directly involved with is Metro. So I know that he's been reluctant to speak directly with respect to that issue, and so that's been disappointing. So I think that's the most direct bearing his election would have, obviously, to the extent to which he has run a campaign based on immigration issues and things of that nature. That has an impact on our community. Okay.